Especially welcomes you and would even welcome many of you as members. Remember, you don't have to be a journalist. We have two types of membership, communicators and journalists. The communicators part is increasing. The journalist part is having some trouble with all of them. But in any case, there's still plenty of journalists. I'm very proud to introduce this evening's introduce this evening's speaker. I'm not allowed to call him Sir Gary Krupp, so it's Gary Krupp. He doesn't allow me to call him Gary Krupp. He is a remarkable man. He has been knighted by Queen Elizabeth, 2 popes, and honored by the State of Israel. He doesn't shy down. I liked what he said when we had our first conversation. He said that what I say is my Jewish obligation. And of course, he got along famously as soon as he said that, because Bruce, 2 things: his Jewish heritage and his Jewish ethnicity means a great deal to him. And secondly, he has a sense of wanting to do and say the right thing. Having said that, he doesn't shy away from provoking anybody. Mr. Krupp has been a successful businessman. And now the Pave the Way Foundation, which was established to bring greater harmony among all the religions of the world, is what he does. What is my interest in this subject? I'll tell you briefly. I am a playwright. One of my plays, which is being considered for production in New York City, is called Eugenio, which many of you have seen. It deals with this particular period. What I am interested in is getting the right point of view. I have a point of view. I have sifted through evidence for 10 years. This is only one of my plays. I have 10 others, but I spent, I think, more time on this to make sure that I don't miss the mark. And of course, I'm always willing to listen to new information. I have found that this man has all of his information, and I will learn a lot from you, because all of the evidence I've seen, and I'll have to be very frank, is the evidence I've seen from his side. I haven't seen any actual evidence from the other side, and I want to hear that evidence, because I want the play to be on mark. I've said enough about me. Forgive me for speaking so long. Anyhow, Mr. Gary Krupp, for you.
First, thank you very, very much. I want to thank Tony for asking us, my wife Meredith and I and some friends here today. And first, and I'm going to say something that he's mad at, he'll get angry at, because he said, don't ever say this, but it's true. I'm not an expert, no matter what the flyer says. I'm not a historian. I'm not a scholar. What I am is somebody who my wife and I formed a foundation, Pave the Way Foundation, which is different than any other in the world, because we deal with problems between religions. We do not deal with religions. We do not deal with how somebody prays or to whom they pray. We stay away from theology. What we do is identify real problems, diplomatic problems, and practical problems. For example, when people come to the State of Israel and they ran into problems at the airport, we identify them and we solve them. If you go to our website, you'll get an idea of the actual scope of the areas we work in, because it's quite remarkable. We have huge historic gestures between religions. We were able to bring we first of all had the largest Jewish audience in history, just to say thank you to Pope John Paul II, and that was his last audience. He was sick a few days later, and my friend Sarah, her uncle, was there, and actually your uncle, who's on our board of directors, was the lawyer, and everybody who came up to the Pope, he greeted 168 Jewish leaders, 6 Israeli ambassadors, and he greeted everyone except for her uncle. He blessed her uncle. But it was a fantastic event. We also established some wonderful, wonderful projects. We made a request to bring the writings of Maimonides, the most important writings in Judaism, from the Vatican Library to the State of Israel. And we did that in 2007, and then we opened and we paved the way to that happening. It was the first loan in history from the Vatican to the State of Israel. And then the Israelis loaned back to the Vatican a Rembrandt and Botticelli for the 600th anniversary of the Basilica of St. Peter. which is great. We felt wonderful about that, and that is now open. We gave the Catholic Church the most important Christian manuscript in the world. We discovered it was being sold privately, the Bodmer Papyrus. It's the Gospels of St. John and St. Luke, written in the year 175 AD. And we went about, it was being sold privately with Christie. We found a donor to acquire this, and it's now in the possession of the Vatican Library, now open for worldwide learning for the first time in history. This is the sort of thing we work on. We also, there was a problem with the affirmation of the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, where the government was not affirming him, which was creating all kinds of problems and difficulties in Israel. And we got involved, and we wrote a letter to the Chief Justice of Israel, and she actually listened to us and actually were able to get the problem solved, and he's now the Greek Patriarch. So we've opened up these doorways between the Israelis and different sects. We work with all of the churches and work with the Palestinians and the Israelis, things like that. So we work in very, very positive areas. This area, the area of World War II and the records and the history of Pius XII, was something that I definitely did not want to get involved with. Mary and I grew up, you know, Jewish kid in Queens, New York, and I grew up hating him. I read Constantine's Sword, all of these other situations, and I said, this guy was a Nazi collaborator. He was an anti-Semite. He cared more about Vatican assets than he cared about the Jewish people, and did absolutely nothing during the war. This is what we believed. But all of these officials that we deal with, because at the same time we were dealing with the Vatican's diplomatic relations with the State of Israel, so we shuttled back and forth between Rome and Jerusalem. So the Apostolic Nuncio to Israel, the Vatican ambassador to Israel, said, we have a problem. We'd like you to help us with it. And I said, what's the problem? He said, well, Yad Vashem just redecorated, and they put this placard up, which is extremely negative on Pius XII, and it's in the room of the room of shame, with Hitler's portrait and with Roosevelt and people like this and so on, and Mussolini, and we're very upset with it. So Mary and I had lunch with the nuncio. We walked down. I said, what, is he crazy? I don't want to get involved with this. Then I come back to New York, and you see how Providence works with everything that we've done. Mary and I come back to New York, and I get a phone call from Rabbi Joe Potasnik, who was the executive director of the New York Board of Rabbis. And he said, I really need you to do me a favor. Now understand something, yes, it's true that I've been knighted by 2 popes, and I'm actually a Jewish member of the papal household. They call me Your Excellency, and they salute me, and they treat me as though I were like a bishop, and if I write a letter to them, they will respond, and they usually respond positively. So we come back, and Joe asked me to intercede on behalf of a journalist, Dan Kurzman, used to write for the Washington Post, written many, many books, to get him access in Rome on Pius XII, on records and information on Pius XII. And I said, listen, I don't like Pius XII, but I do not want to do anything that's going to further cause conflict between Jews and Catholics. He said, well, just meet with him. So I said, fine. So I met with him, and we had a very interesting conversation. And I'm trying to get this thing to, okay, there it goes. I'm going to plug this in a couple minutes. And the problem was that he was writing a book. I said, well, look, I don't want to deal in any negative subjects. So he said, no, I'm writing a book called The Secret Mission, the plan to kidnap Pius XII and kill him. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Hitler ordered the kidnapping of Pius XII and the killing of the Roman Curia and to seize the Vatican. I said, you got to be kidding. So I immediately called Yad Vashem. My friend is director of Department of the Righteous. Her name is Irina Steinfeld. I said, Irina, did you ever hear of a plan to kidnap the Pope, Pius XII? She said, well, we sort of heard a rumor about it, but we have no proof. Then I spoke to my friend who was the Israeli ambassador to the Vatican, Odette Ben-Hur, and I said, he said, what, are you kidding me? This is huge. Wait, of course not. No, that's impossible. So I called Rome, and I arranged for him now to have access. And he wrote his book. And then I got a phone call from somebody else who said, you know something, you really ought to meet with Sister Margherita Marchione, who is a nun, a little 87-year-old nun, who's written 17 books on this subject. So Mary and I drove out to Morristown, New Jersey, and we sat down with her. And she started going over eyewitness testimony and documents. And I'm looking at this, and I said, this is incredible. And one thing led to another, and we really started to really delve into this thing. And so I used our position in Rome to ask for permission to start gathering some of this information. Now, I did something that everybody in this room can do, which you'll be a little surprised at. Go online, on the internet, go to the archives of the Palestine Post, which is the Jerusalem Post, and the archives of the New York Times, or the Washington Post, or any of the newspapers. Take the years 1939 to 1958. You put the search in Pope Pius XII, Jews, Eugenio Pacelli, and so on, Vatican and Jews. You will find hundreds of articles, many of them where the Pope is protesting the persecution of the Jews. Hundreds, and I'm going to show you just a few. You're not going to find one negative article. Couldn't find one negative article. And I said, something's wrong here. So as we kept moving this project along, we started really learning about this, and especially certain issues, because I think that certainly we need to deal with people when somebody's accused of being an anti-Semite. This is something that we have to take very, very personally. And they accused him of being an anti-Semite. I started going into his history. And we have, for example, the fact that he grew up in Rome, and his best friend growing up was Guido Mendez. Guido Mendez was an Orthodox Jewish boy. He went to high school with him. And every Shabbat, Pacelli would go to his house for Shabbat dinner. He learned to speak Hebrew, and he used to borrow the books of the great rabbis. This is as a young boy before he was a priest. But this thing further carried forward throughout his priesthood, and he became a priest. And I'm going to see if we can get this thing to start to work. I don't know if this is plugged in properly. We're going to start showing some stuff. Actually, I'll probably use this more with the just to give you an example, in 1917, and you know what I did? We looked at some of the books, like Cornwell's book, Hitler's Pope, and I can tell you something. If you look at we have to see if I can get this thing lit, because if anyone looks at the cover of Hitler's Pope, you'll see a picture of Pacelli walking out of German headquarters, and these Nazi soldiers are saluting him. And the caption, the credit for the picture, is that this is Cardinal Pacelli, March 1939, leaving German headquarters. This is what it actually says in the original book. The actual photograph is a 1927 picture of Archbishop Pacelli leaving von Hindenburg's birthday party. So from the beginning of that book, from the cover of the book, throughout the entire thing, claims that this man has made in Hitler's Pope have been completely false, provably false. For example, he said that he spent several months at the Vatican Secret Archives. He said he had full access to the war years of the archives. Absolutely not true. According to the sign-in sheets, he was there for a 3-hour period over 3 weeks. He was never in. The secret section is closed. It's completely closed, and I'll explain why. And Cornwell fabricated this. And this is one thing after another. Now, if you look up in Wikipedia, John Cornwell's book, Hitler's Pope, and it's going to tell you that wait a second. I may get it on. Wait a second. If you look up Wikipedia, you're going to see, you'll see his definite, why he was considered, okay, great. It's like we're getting someplace.
You're getting it.
Perfect. No, this is fine. I'll just run through some of these when I finish. And according to Wikipedia, he said that he established his that he was anti-Semitic because in 1917, the chief rabbi of Germany, his name was Rabbi Werner, had asked him to intercede because the palms that they used for Sukkot were being held up by the Italians on the Italian border, and he wanted Pacelli to intercede to get these released. And so he refused. This is what Cornwell says. I have the original documents, which are incredible, because in those documents in 1917, Pacelli is writing to the Cardinal Secretary of State, pleading with him, please, this is the most wonderful thing for Jewish-Catholic relations, and that if you do this, it would open everything up, he says, and we only have 2 weeks to distribute these palms to all the Jews of Germany. in 1917. They couldn't do it. Why? Because the Vatican did not have diplomatic relations with Italy. So, unfortunately, they failed, but he didn't refuse to help them. He certainly did help them. And I was wondering, well, gee, didn't Cornwell even bother looking at this document? I could get it. I'm a schlemiel from Long Beach, New York. How is it I can get this stuff and these great historians can't get it? What we've discovered is that the Vatican archives are open up to 1939. In these records is everything up to his entire 65% of his ministry, 65% of his life. The archives of the war years, from 1939 to 1958, for the rest of his papacy, are still closed. And the only reason they're closed is because there are 31 million documents in 50,000 cases. Now let me tell you how this has to be done. They take a section of papers and they sew them together, they number every page, they review every page, identify it, and then stamp it with a Vatican seal. And then it's put into a book form. Why? Number one, to keep people from stealing the documents. And number two, so they can identify them and retrieve them for the future research. They have to do this for 31 million documents. They just finished the archives of Pius XI in 2000. And so, and they had 3 people working on this. So I actually made a request directly to Pope Benedict. I said, Your Holiness, I said, you should consider increasing the number of people so we can get this open. And he did. It went from 3 to 26 people, because they're very highly trained people and they have the security and so on and so forth. And so that's pushing along. We may actually see those open in 2 to 3 years. But we do have access to many of those documents. I'm going to run through a few of these to give you an idea of what we found. Now, understand, I'm not trying to convince anybody of this. I'm not going to try to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong. I don't intend to do that. I don't expect to. It took me 4 years before I did stuff, and you're not going to have this in one night. But I want you to have an idea of what the experience I went through this change. And now I went from being shocked to being angry, because certainly as Jews, we have very few heroes. And somebody stole this hero from us. And according to many of the Jewish leaders at the time, and certainly, and I'll show you pictures of them, virtually every Jewish leader, every Israeli loved him up until 1963. And what happened there? The play The Deputy came out. This book, which is not published yet, was written by a friend of ours, Ron Rishlak, and the highest-ranking KGB agent ever to defect from Romania. He was responsible for the disinformation project to completely destroy the reputation of the church, because this was the KGB disinformation network that went after the went after the Catholic Church, after Pacelli personally, because Stalin hated him, and so did Khrushchev. And Khrushchev and Stalin were both vehement anti-Semites, and they wanted to isolate the Jews from the Catholics. So in one swift operation, they succeeded in this, and the result was the worst character assassination of the 20th century, without question. Because the documents we have prove that this guy was the greatest hero of World War II. And every single time, and I'm attacked all the time. You go online, you're going to see people calling me all kinds of names and everything else. And I've been debating online, I've been writing things, I said, don't tell me about the fact that I'm not a historian. Here is a document that I have. You show me what's wrong about this. Did I miss? Is it a forgery? Am I not understanding what it's saying? Please explain this. But I never ever hear a thing about what we found, the actual documents. And I'm going to just review a few things which were just absolutely astounding to me. As I said, the event in 1917 with the chief rabbi of Germany. Also in 1917, Nachum Sokolov, who was the head of the World Zionist Organization, met with Pacelli, who was then the nuncio to Germany. And he wanted to talk to him about an idea they had in the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Pacelli got so excited about it that he arranged for Nachum Sokolov to meet with Pope Benedict XV. He intervened, he also intervened to arrange for Chaim Weizmann to meet with Cardinal Gaspari for the same notion. He met with Nachum Sokolov again in 1925, the same subject. And actually, Pacelli is responsible for the creation of the modern state of Israel, because in 1947, during the United Nations the United Nations vote to partition Palestine, there were 33 states against, 33 states voting, 17 were in favor, and 11 were against. 17, no, it's, yeah, something, I can't remember the exact vote, but the 17, oh no, there was 33 in favor and 11 against. Of the 33, 17 were Catholic countries that all went to the Pope. What should we do? He says, I do not object to this. And it actually passed. We have instances, little instances, where one of his best friends when he was nuncio was the Jewish conductor Bruno Walter. Now, if you go to Bruno Walter's book, he was a conductor of the German symphony. One of his musicians was imprisoned for anti-Semitic reasons and was going to be executed. And they did everything to try to get him out. So Bruno Walter goes to Bocelli, can you help us? He says, yes, I will do everything I can, and he was successful in getting this guy released. 1926, he urged all Catholics to join the pro-Palestine organization, creating a Jewish homeland in Palestine. These are documents that we have. We can prove every one of these statements. And I'm going to show you these things. I'm going over now, but you'll see them when we review it. 1938, I have the sign, you'll see the signed letter from Bocelli, where the Polish government was going to pass an anti-kosher slaughtering law. And in this letter, he says, I find this is going to cause grave persecution of the Jewish people, and I object to it, and they overturn the law. So we have many, many, many examples. We have something very interesting when I'm going to show you these letters. Now, when I spoke to Yad Vashem once about this, and all I keep doing is asking questions, and they don't seem to have answers for me. But they said, yes, he helped only converted Jews. So we checked into this, and the fact is that the Concordat that was signed in 1933, that he's criticized for signing with Germany, provided that any Jews who converted to Roman Catholicism would fall under the protection of the Roman Catholic Church. Using this clause, he was able to protect tens of thousands of Jews because he called them something special. This is the first time in the history of the Catholic Church, in any documents, that they use these phrases: non-Arian Catholics, converted Catholic Italians, and you'll see them in these letters. We have a letter, Kristallnacht is November 10th, 1938. 3 weeks later, Bocelli writes, as Secretary of State, a telegram to 65 nuncios saying we must try to bring these people, take these people out of Germany. It's a telegram. 3 weeks after that, he now sends a letter, again, to 65 nuncios and bishops, asking for 200,000 visas for non-Arian Catholics. Now, does anybody in his right mind think there were 200,000 converted Jews in Germany in 1938, right after Kristallnacht? This is absolutely absurd. Plus the fact that in order to go through a conversion, you have to be baptized, and you have to go through catechism, and you have to go through education, and this takes months and months and months. It's not that easy, according to canon law. So we have this, and then and I'm going to show you also the letter that came back from the Archbishop of Scotland answering this. So we have so many different examples of this. We also have the examples of all of the amount of hatred that Bocelli had for Hitler from absolute day one. We're talking about from the early 20s when he first started. Bocelli tells his housekeeper, he said that this man is capable of trampling on corpses. He's absolutely nothing. And I'm going to show you a letter from the United States Foreign Service where the day after Bocelli was elected Pope, this is on the 3rd of March, 1939. This is an American Consul General to Cologne, Germany, writing to the U.S. government to inform them what the new Pope's attitude is towards Adolf Hitler and National Socialism. In this letter, he said that Adolf Hitler is an untrustworthy scoundrel, incapable of moderation, and the diplomat says that I understood his position on National Socialism, but I had no idea the extremeness in which he was so vehemently against him. So we have multiple examples. He's writing by hand. You'll see notes that we have where he's writing by hand that National Socialism in 1925, May 1st and May 4th, 1925, that National Socialism is the worst heresy of our time, and on and on. We have the handwritten notes when he was discussed in 1938 that discussed it, that the Italian government is importing German anti-Semitism, incredible things, and then he actually acted secretly to take Jews from Italy, and so when Guido Mendes, for one, 1938, Mendes was fired, And he goes to his friend and he said, I'm going to send you to Argentina. You're going to work for us. And we're going to save you. He says, I don't want to go to Argentina. I want to go to Israel or to Palestine. He says, fine, so sent him to Palestine. But we have it in his book. And he became a thoracic surgeon in Ramat Gan, and his son became an Israeli ambassador. So we have the book his son wrote, relating all of these things that had happened to the childhood, and he talks about Shabbat dinner and so on and so forth. So we have multiple examples of how he felt about the Germans, about Hitler, and so on. And it's all based on documents that we've located. So I can't get anybody to comment on this, and I also can't get anybody to show me a document proving their position, which I've tried. 2008, Paved the Way Foundation had a symposium in Rome. Now, I had already gathered a huge amount of information, and I took a lot of testimony. Mary and I went to France to interview Monsignor Ferrofino, which I want to tell you about. Yeah, well, we'll show the slides, but I just want to briefly, because then you'll be able to relate to some of these things. Monsignor Ferrofino worked directly for Pius XII. And he was in the papal palace. He was with him all the time. And the Pope would send him to the president of Portugal to request visas for Jews coming into Portugal. And the Pope said, you could see, if you go on my website, you could see the actual video where the Pope would slam on his head. He says, why don't the Americans understand? We have to save this community. He was very frustrated by the fact that nobody would help. Because trust me, when the diplomats asked, how many Jews can you take? They said none. Canada said none are too many. So there was no cooperation at all. So he would have to do that, and he used the trickery of calling them non-Aryan Catholics and everything else, and was able to get them out of the country. We have it requesting visas for Brazil. He requested 3,000 visas for Brazil, and they were granted, but the Vatican only got 1,000, and the Brazilian embassy in Germany got 2,000. Those were never used. The 1,000 that the Vatican had were used, and guess what? Those Jews who went to Brazil got there, 1 week later, their visas were revoked for practicing non-Orthodox religious ceremonies, Shabbat. But they went, and it says, non-Aryan Catholics. So we know that this was a trick. Why was it? Because they had to protect their neutrality. And this was critical. And it was critical during the arrest of the Roman Jews in October 16, 1943, where in one day, Pius XII rescued, it's actually an estimate of 11,000 Jews. 1,259 were arrested and were taken to the military academy. Of those, 257 were released. 1,002 went on the trains to Auschwitz. I also have the telegram from Germany. They weren't supposed to go to Auschwitz. I had the original telegram. They were supposed to go to Mauthausen to be held as hostages to negotiate their release. So we have all of these documents, and everybody says, well, we've seen them all before. I said, well, how come nobody knows this? I am not dealing with historians. I'm not trying to convince a historian who's a scientist and he sits and he ponders over scraps of paper. I'm talking to the everyday person. Because the difference, if you go to any legitimate historian, they will all tell you he was not anti-Semitic, he was not a Nazi collaborator, he hated Hitler. He said he could have done more, they could have done this, they could have done, which is easy to say, as a Monday morning quarterback, and met people who have never lived under a Nazi regime when you had a gun pointed to your head. But this is what they say. But it's the everyday person who thinks that this was the worst man in the world. That's who I'm talking to. And we actually wrote a book, which I have a few copies, which we're going to give out, a couple of them. I don't want that many for everybody. But we show you the picture of the document. I didn't do any footnoting here. We got the documents, and that's what it says. I don't need to footnote. This is where the documents, this is what we have. And we just translated it into Hebrew. It's the first defense of Pius XII ever written in Hebrew, which I have here also. This just actually came out just a few weeks ago. So we have a lot of this information, and it's quite remarkable. So after a certain amount of time, I'm starting to say something's grossly wrong here. But what's happening is I'm being attacked by people. All I'm doing is presenting information. Go to my website, you'll find 40,000 pages of documents. You'll find all of the L'Osservatore Romano newspapers from 1938 to 1945, 24,000 pages. We have everything we can get our hands on, we're putting on the website. And I'm begging the critics, send me something, anything. But here's the shock. This is the most incredible thing. Literally none of these critics have come to the Vatican archives, which were opened in 2003. We have assignment sheets. None of them have come. They're screaming about open the Vatican archives, open the Vatican archives. Wait a minute, 65% of this man's life is already available to you and you're not coming to look at it. So I have a guy, we have a representative from Germany, he's a brilliant, brilliant guy, a most wonderful historian, and he goes and he digs this stuff out, and that's where I'm getting it from. So I'm putting stuff that's from the open archives, which everybody can get. So I'm gonna start off quickly with this little review of documents. See if I can get this thing up. Okay. And here in this is Pacelli, it was in Germany from 1917 to 1929. Out of 44 public speeches, 40 of them were against National Socialism. And over here, in this magazine, the German Office of Enlightenment, Public Enlightenment, sent 10 million copies of pamphlets into South America and Europe protesting the Vatican's defense of the Jews. In this letter, this is after meeting with Pope Pius XI in 1938. Pacelli writes by hand. He says that he's disgusted with the Italian government's bringing their German anti-Semitism into Italy. These are the documents where he writes in May of 1924, first and fourth, that National Socialism is the greatest heresy of our time. And this one says that National Socialism, is the heresy of National Socialism puts the state and race above all else, above true religion, above the truth, and above justice. Okay, now this is very interesting, because I remember in Constantine's sword, when I remember that, they said that, how come Pacelli nobody ever excommunicated the Nazis? They did. These are the original documents of the German bishops, 1930, 1931, where they said that anybody who joined the National Socialist Party, the Nazi Party, anyone who wore the uniform, or anyone who flew the flag, are hereby no longer permitted to receive the sacraments of the church, and the priest cannot officiate at their funeral, and so on. And by the way, later, when you see the letter from the U.S. government, Pacelli says he supported this position of the priest. Now, this is an Observatory Romano article that says, see, the party of Hitler. This was talking about the excommunication. 1930. This is also in Germany, a few weeks after Hitler was elected chancellor, 1933. It says a serious word about serious times. This was a Catholic newspaper condemning what happened. Now also, you have to understand that they despised each other. Hitler hated the Pope. And this is on the day of his coronation. Germany was the only country not to send any representative. And you can see some of these claims. This is the letter from the U.S. government. And this is the most important view. And again, it was March 3rd, 1939, day after he was elected Pope. He says his views, he's talking about Pacelli, while well known to me, surprised me by their extremeness. He said that he opposed unalterably every compromise with National Socialism. He regarded Hitler not only as an untrustworthy scoundrel, but as a fundamentally wicked person. Hitler was incapable of moderation. He supported the German bishops in their anti-Nazi stand. That was the excommunication. At the risk of losing part of the Catholic youth in Germany. In other words, these kids would join the Nazi youth and everything. He says, even if we lose them, he said there was not as great a consequence to the Catholic Church in general and around the world for surrendering to the Nazis. This gives you an example. These were in the German newspapers, all making fun of Pacelli while he was nuncio. And, where these are different types of political cartoons. You could just get an idea of the attitude. I'm not going to read every one of them. These are all from the German newspapers. Okay, now this is very interesting. This is the internal Gestapo report. Mary and I went to Germany and we got these. This is called the Kaltenbrunner report. The assassination attempt against Hitler. This was 1944. Valkyrie, everybody knows the movie and everything like that. Over here, Pacelli and Leiber were co-conspirators in that assassination, and they were. Now, how do we know this? Because the Germans asked that if they kill Hitler, can they negotiate? Will the Pope intercede to negotiate a truce with the British? And he said only with the death of Hitler. That's what he had said. And the fact is, if you go to the Vatican archives, you will not find one scrap of information about this. Why? Because it would have destroyed. Had it come out, it would have destroyed the neutrality. Obviously, because he's plotting to kill Hitler. But if you go to the British archives, you'll find the actual records of those conversations. Now here, this is a confidential OSS document, and it's dated 1944. It details the link of the Pope's involvement with the attempt to kill Hitler and through Father Leiber. This was through the U.S. government. Now this is very interesting. It's a very important concept. July 31st, 1942, the Archbishop of Utrecht in Holland wrote this vehement condemnation of the arrest of the Dutch Jews. And they smuggled this in, they gave it to all the churches throughout Holland, and it was read aloud. And the Nazi commander reacted very, very, very predictably. He said, if the Roman Catholic Church thinks they're going to save the life of one Jew, they're sadly mistaken. Because of this man's outburst, his remarks, not only are we going to accelerate the arrest of the Jews, we're also going to arrest all of the Jews who converted to Roman Catholicism. They're now the first to go, and that's exactly what happened. In this Nazi report, it states that they said all of the other Protestant churches, nobody objected to the arrest. It says only the Roman Catholic Church objected to the arrest. And this is the same thing after Kristallnacht. And this was a protest against Pacelli, against the world Jewry, and it's black, the Catholic Church, and red Bolshevik allies. This was a protest that the Germans were mounting. Okay, these are some of the examples of how the Vatican acted to save some of the Jews. Now, here we have, it was policy of the Vatican. In this article, it says that this is from 1942, where this Catholic magazine said that the Vatican is now interceding. They're hiring the Jews who were fired during the racial laws. And over here, you can see one of the Jewish newspapers influenced the Vatican to help the Jews. This is the letter that I talked about in Poland. You see his handwriting over here? It's Cardinal Pacelli. And you can see what it says, where it's protesting, and it's going to cause great persecution to the Jewish people. They overturned this. And when they gave me this, it didn't mean a lot to them. I said, this means a huge amount to me. I said, here's something that if you were an anti-Semite, I can guarantee you couldn't care less. And by the way, just to speak about this one subject, within the Vatican itself, there were at times up to 500 Jews in the Vatican in Rome. There were several thousand throughout the ecclesiastical houses. In the Vatican, they had up to 500, and they actually brought a kosher butcher in to prepare the meat for these people, which was absolutely unbelievable. We had one eyewitness who, if you go to my website, you can see it, Robert Adler, whose father was one of the people who went into the Vatican and was there for 5 weeks, and then he was shipped to the Dominican Republic. Follows all of the other stuff that we found. Okay, now this is the letter. This is very, very critical. This is the letter right after Kristallnacht. Now over here, this is the telex that first went out. That was 3 weeks after. This is the one that came out afterwards. Now, this is actually written in High Latin. And in the High Latin, what it says is that he's asking for 200,000 visas for non-Aryan Catholics. And he said that you should not only take care of these people, you should also be aware to take care of their religious precepts, their religious books, and their religious institutions. Now, why would you say that about Catholics going to a Catholic country? Now, over here, this is the response from Scotland. A few weeks later, see, one was dated January 9th, and that's January 16th, I think. And here you could read the letter where he's responding. He says, "Yes, we're going to do everything we can for these persecuted Jews." He knew exactly what they were talking about. This is a letter back from Scotland. This was in the Irish press, Pope with his aid to the refugees. Okay, now this is another incident that occurred in 1917 when he was nuncio. The Swiss Jewish community were protesting, went to Pacelli, and they said, in Palestine, the Ottoman Turks just massacred all the Armenians. And the Jews of Palestine were afraid they were going to be massacred. So Pacelli interceded, and these are his letters going back and forth to the German government to assure the safety of the Jews of Palestine. And he guaranteed, the German government said they will protect the Jews of Palestine even with the use of arms. And they succeeded. But again, anti-Semites don't do that. Okay, and this is the story about Bruno Walter. And by the way, you know, you'll hear about a lot of people talk about mainstream historians are against him. The fact is that's not true. Very few historians are against Pacelli. The vast majority of them are very much behind him, one of whom is Sir Martin Gilbert, who Mary and we interviewed him in London, who's Jewish. He was the official biographer to Sir Winston Churchill, and he's also the world's expert on World War II. And over here, and this is just out of his book, where he said that with announcements were coming over Vatican radio, where it says that he who makes a distinction between Jews and other men is unfaithful to God and is in conflict with God's commands. Now, and over here you could see, these are some of the letters. Did they help converted Jews? And you could see where it says non-Aryan, it'll say non-Aryan Catholics and so on and so forth. And it's amazing because these people all read this information and they still came up with the same conclusion. Yeah, you only help converted Jews. Fact is, this is absolutely not true. Okay, and this is the same thing where, these are newspaper articles, by the way, from the New York Times, talking about the Vatican reveals its help to Jews from those years. And this is when they were sending them to Brazil. They were trying to get these visas, 3,000 visas, and they only, as I said, only got 1,000. And the others were sent to the Brazilian embassy in Germany, and they threw them out. They didn't even use them. They expired. But the Vatican used every one of theirs. Okay, now this is Monsignor Ferrofino. And I'm going to tell you what he did, which is remarkable. He was the guy who went to Portugal. He was physically with the Pope. The Pope would slam his hand down on the table. But what he did after he left the service of the Pope, he was made the assistant to the secretary. He was a secretary to the nuncio in the Dominican Republic. And he would receive 2 times a year, directly from Pius XII, a double encrypted telegram. Double encrypted because, first of all, it was not in Italian, it was in some other language, and he wouldn't tell us what it was. And then you would have to count the letters and decodify it. In other words, he was an expert, he knew how to do this, and he physically did this. And the letters would always be the same thing. As soon as the Vatican were able to get a ship to bring Jews from Portugal or Spain to the Dominican Republic, typically it'd be 835 or 800 people on board. And they said they would separate the men from the women so they can get the maximum number of people on board the ship. But he would have to go to General Trujillo. He would drive 1.5 days with the Apostolic Nuncio, with a letter in hand saying, in the name of Pius XII, I'm asking for 832 visas. This happened 2 times a year, at least, from 1939 to 1945. Over 11,000 Jews were shuttled through this system, and that's the guy who did it. He just died, what, 3 weeks ago? It was very sad. And this further tells me, here's a newspaper article also about the Vatican has its flag on ships on the high seas. Okay, and again, this is the only reference you'll find in Rome. And when I brought this video back to Rome, and I showed this to the expert, the high judge of the cause, this guy is the world's expert on Pius XII, he said, I never knew this happened. There's no record of this even happening. And we have dozens and dozens of situations like this. Now, by the way, now, this is very important. We're going to get to the Roman Jews. Because on October 16, 1943, it was Pius XII that stopped the arrest of the Roman Jews. Because all of a sudden, Susan Zuccotti wrote a book beneath his very windows. And in that book, she claims, you know, and it's astounding, some of the assumptions she makes, that he did absolutely nothing, when in fact he did. And we go through the entire circumstance of how when he has a visit from Princess Pignatelli at 7 o'clock in the morning because somebody had woken her up. They started the early morning arrests, and she rushed to the Vatican. She got a German officer to take her there, and she wanted to see the Pope immediately. And he immediately had her come in, and she said, they're arresting the Jews. And he said, they promised they wouldn't do this. I don't understand. In my own diocese, under my very windows, he says, call the German ambassador. They called von Weizsäcker to come in, and they vehemently protested it. But he said, he's not going to do anything. So then, he sends his nephew to Carlo Pacelli to meet with Bishop Hudel. Now, Bishop Hudel was an Austrian bishop who was a pro-Nazi bishop. This is one guy who helped some Nazis escape. And he was pushed away from all ecclesiastic. He was excluded from everything. But the Pope sent his nephew to write a letter immediately to demand the stop of the arrests. But he knew the letter would not arrive in time. So then he gets his closest friend, Pancratius Pfeiffer, who's another priest, to physically go to see General Stahel, who was the city commander in Rome, and demanded that the Pope was going to speak out vehemently against this. And I will explain why that threat meant so much very, very shortly. But that was enough to get General Stahel to call Himmler directly, who was not a military man, and come up with a military excuse why the arrest should stop. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that same day, the arrest stopped. If you ask Susan Zuccotti why that happened, she says, well, they couldn't find the Jews, so they stopped. Right. I mean, some of these things that happen are absolutely, it's just outrageous. And here you see Eichmann, in his own diary, it says that reveals that the church was hiding the Jews in convents, and so on and so forth. So we have multiple records over here. This is also during the time these people were being kept in all the 477 ecclesiastical buildings for months and months on end. They had to be fed. So the Vatican would send out these little cars, Vaticano, and here's the Pope reviewing bread and everything, and they would bring supplies to all of these houses so they could help feed them. Because don't forget, these people had no ration cards, so they had to feed them, and they managed to do that. Now, I'm going to explain something to you. Why did that threat mean so much? They knew, the generals knew that, and you're going to see shortly, you'll see the plan when Hitler ordered General Karl Wolff to invade the Vatican and kill the Pope. General Wolff knew, von Weizsäcker knew, General Stahel knew that if that actually happened, there would be massive riots all over Europe. They were having enough trouble dealing with the partisans and trying to win the war, but the riots would have been massive. So they did everything in their power to keep Hitler from ordering this. So von Weizsäcker would send false cables to Berlin. Those were called tactical lies. But those cables were used by Holkopf when he wrote his play, The Deputy. But the fact is that the threat of the Pope speaking, and they said to the Pope, if you speak out, it's going to be, you're going to get, Hitler is going to order the arrest of the invasion of the Vatican, and it's going to be devastating. So they did everything to avoid this. And that threat was enough to stop the arrest. Now, these are some of the signs that General Stahel then took these signs, this is, you see the swastika on there, and they put them on every single ecclesiastical building. That this is the properties of the Holy See, and you're not permitted to enter. No German troops are permitted to enter.
Oh, Gary. Just one question.
Yeah.
Are we going to have time for questions? Because I know that.
Oh yeah. How long have we been going?
40 minutes. But
40 minutes?
Yeah.
Time goes quickly. I just want to show you one thing very quickly.
Because I know we have a lot of questions, and it's very interesting. I'm sorry for the intrusion.
These are actual documents, but where these are nuns that took the people and said at the orders of the Pope, where they said that he had nothing to do with that. This is in the summer residence of the Pope. There were like 8,000 refugees, 3,000 of them were Jews. That's the Pope's bedroom. On the upper left, there were 10 Jewish children born in that room. They were sleeping on the stairways over here. There's also a press release that this was bombed, and 1,000 people were injured and 300 were killed. So we know that they had a lot of people here. Now we have, and also you can see up here, these are newspaper articles. 1944 meets with the chief rabbi of Israel, and so on. I just want to give you, there's so much stuff here. It's very, very hard. And again, I'm not an expert in this. I will. I want you to see this statement. This telegram, signed Pius XII, was sent to the regent of Hungary, where he told him that you must stop deporting the Jews. Now, according to Sir Martin Gilbert, this arrived exactly at the time of the greatest danger to the Hungarian Jews, and he listened. He stopped deporting the Jews, saved the lives of 200,000 Jews. Now, we also interviewed somebody who was physically saved in the nunciature in Budapest. He's a Jewish boy who was saved there, who physically opened the door when Admiral Horthy's family was admitted. Now, over here, General Levi, this is a statement made by, he's the leading scholar of the Jewish extermination in Hungary, where he observed about when he's talking about Pius XII. He says, it's a particularly regrettable irony that the one person in all occupied Europe who did more than anyone else to halt the dreadful crime and alleviate its consequences is today made the scapegoat for the failures of all the others. Okay, you know what we'll do? We'll take some questions, but I do have...
Gary, I'll come up and help
You come up and do that.
I'll be on the question. Yes.
Right.
Answer the questions.
Yeah, let's see. These are all testimonies that we have from different people that acted. I do want to show you something very, very quickly, if I can, and that's going to be the just a few of the newspaper articles that we found. We're not going to go through all the other stuff. But again, I'm not capable of answering questions on certain things. If there are rumors and stuff that happen, I can't deal with it. I need to see original documents of someone, and I have to get, so. But anything I can answer a question, or if we have a document which can respond to it, that'll be great. But I don't want to finish this because this is very, very important. This is actual Jewish appreciation.
I know they have a lot of questions because they know how smart you are.
By the way, the Roman Jewish community, who so desperately hates Pius XII today, erected this plaque in 1946 after liberation. Of all of the Italian Jewish communities did this, put this plaque up where it talks about how Pius XII saved their lives. That plaque has mysteriously disappeared. It's the Israeli Philharmonic coming to 1955. The Israelis, all refugees from saved by the church. These are some of the personalities that praised him: Golda Meir, Nachum Goldman, the chief rabbi of Israel, Herzog. I was with him. In fact, Mary and I were in Paris in November having a talk on this. And Serge Klausfield, famous Nazi hunter, was one of the people who was on the panel with us. Again, said, Pius XII saved my life. And he, can swear to it. Chief rabbi of Norway. Now this is also, what? Huh? Okay, go ahead, Tony.
Thank you very, very much, Gary.
Well, we're not close to finished. You're all going to have to stay.
Here I raised such a fuss because we didn't. Is this working? Yeah. It's working. Could you tell them and apologize to all of them? Gary, that was the thing.
It's not done yet. I'm just going to keep.
Oh, you're going to
just keep doing as you keep.
take questions.
Okay.
Go ahead. Certainly take. But Albert Einstein too. These are the people who they don't know what they're talking about. But go ahead.
I think a lot of this will come out in the questioning. Can we turn some lights on?
If there's 31 more...
Okay, wait a minute, here.
That's all
Can you
right.
put...
Yeah, we can hear.
If there's 31 million more documents out there that we haven't seen, why not reserve judgment?
We are. They are. I agree with you.
I want everybody to hear you.
Because don't forget, what you're talking about is the canonization. I'm not talking about canonization. I'm talking about what we know right now is enough that I believe he should be righteous among nations of Yad Vashem. Because his life was in danger is one of the qualifications. And last month we submitted the official nomination because we have you have to have notarized statements. You're 100% right. My personal view is that they should not be rushing this canonization. But the Pope has access to every document in there. So every day as they're cataloging things, they keep bringing new documents to him. And he did a personal study. This was actually signed 4 years ago.
Yeah, but not to interrupt you,
Yeah.
because you've done a great job here of bringing selected documents to our attention.
I'm trying to get the unselected.
That's what before I make a judgment or change whatever opinion I came in here tonight with, I think we need to see what's still unavailable.
Yep, absolutely true. And you know what? They are going to be available.
I hope to live so long.
It's actually probably within 2 or 3 years. But will anybody come to see them? My question to you.
You should.
I will be there. I'm going to be actually at the Vatican.
Paul will.
I'm going to be at the Vatican when that announcement comes. I'm going to be at there because we're going to take the names of the people, just like we did before. The people who are actually going in to look at this stuff, because right now there's 17 million documents that nobody's bothered to look at except us. So we're going to open it up, and you know what? You're going to have people that are going to say, you know what? They sanitized it. They did this. But the bottom line is that ultimately the truth is going to come out, and that's what's going to happen.
Okay. Madame, it would be nice if you identified yourself. That happens to be Paul Pascal, a prominent attorney on Capitol Hill.
I'm Suzanne Brown Fleming of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I have a lot of questions for you, but let's start with the statement you've just made about no one using the archives in Rome. I know that Hubert Wolff at University
Yes.
of Munster in
He
Germany.
just wrote a book about it.
Correct. First, what do you
I'm
think?
not saying nobody. I'm not saying
That
nobody.
is what you
I'm
just
saying,
said, sir.
no, Susan Zuccotti hasn't been there, and Cornwell hasn't been there, Gabriel Walensky hasn't been there. All of the people who've written a lot of books have not been there, and the fact is there have been very few that have gone, but Wolf is one of them. And by the way, I got a very nice letter from them because you guys were invited to come to the symposium that we had, specifically to meet the experts. I'm not an expert, and you graciously declined.
Yes, that's because it was not an academic conference.
Well, you're
sir.
about to get invited to one that Les Sorbonne is going to be sponsoring, and I hope you attend that one.
Who is organizing that?
They are. I'm meeting with them, and we're going to help them with it.
The
But they're
Sorbonne?
running it.
Who in the Sorbonne?
Actually, you know Professor Yigal Limor?
And who's
She's an Israeli professor of history.
Memoria Gil
Limor, yes.
And Huson.
and Edward Husson
Yes. Just got an email from him just now.
have agreed to have a conference.
They asked us.
Yes, they asked us to help them with it. So they're going to Rome, and I'm hoping that you guys attend that.
Hmm.
I didn't realize Mrs. knew just as much as Mr., which he does.
I don't know
Just
that
tell
much. I'm
Mr.
telling you.
what to say.
All I'm saying is that we're finally...
Listen, I told you you're not allowed to say that.
Okay.
Please. You're not allowed to say that because you're very helpful. You had another question, and then I'm going to pass it around.
Well, let's pass it, and then you can come back.
I will come back. Come on, others, don't be shy. Hello. I don't want to knock those cameras down. Hi. And please give your name.
Elaine O'Meara with no background in this area.
She's quite knowledgeable.
But my question is, why aren't people from the Vatican, or why in all this time has anyone not tried to publish something using these documents that would support the Pope? Why are you?
They did. They did.
And where is that material?
It's on my website.
But why only on your website?
Because
Why-
I digitized them. They published the 9,000 pages of the acts and documents of the Holy See during the Second World War, which they had gone through to pull out as many as they could find. There were 4 Jesuits that pulled out documents. And we have a search engine which will enable anybody to go through this and pull out every document. For example, the Jews are mentioned, or this is mentioned in any language. It'll pull it out. So it's a great, great search engine. And a lot of the scholars, for example, from Canada and so on, they wrote us that they're absolutely thrilled with it because it's made it so much easier for them. And then we also have, as I said, many, many other documents that are there. But again, a lot of this stuff I'm not qualified to go over, so I need to have the experts actually sit and go through them.
Where is the money for your foundation coming from?
We have from our board of directors. We have a board of directors that are very committed, and Sarah's uncle is one of them, and so on, and they support it. And
Oh, your name?
I'm not being antagonistic to you.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
My lawyer's training is
we operate a very little budget.
Is any of the money coming from the Vatican?
No. In fact, when the New York Times did an article on this, they asked me, can we go through the books, the financial records of your foundation? I said, absolutely. And they went through from the day we started until the end. And in fact, less than nothing. In fact, the Vatican, if anything, has been not as cooperative as they could have been with us. We've made requests and they have not granted. No, you can't do that. If you can't, we have one letter, for example, the September 16th, where the Pope was resigning. His letter of resignation because he was about to be killed and to form new government in exile. That letter I've seen, and I have a rabbi, a very important Israeli rabbi who is with him today. He was in Rome today, and he got to see a few of these documents. So can't take a picture of it, but stuff like that. I'm stuck with that frustration because I just say, well, why don't we just put this out there? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
No.
My name is Ben Barber. I'm a reporter, freelance reporter. I'd like to ask the lady from the Holocaust Museum, are you skeptical about some of this material? And do you feel that the Pope should have done more, or that there's something, we're just getting part of the story, that there's more that we don't know? Do you have some information that would balance what we've heard?
With documents and things that we can verify.
Right. You may or may not be aware that the Vatican has been cooperating with the museum to make microfilm copies of the 2003 and 2006 materials. We have partial copies of those in Washington. It's the only place in the world other than Rome where they're available. Scholars in the Visiting Fellows program do go through them. I've been going through them myself. I'm a scholar of the Church and the Holocaust. In terms of the museum's position, the museum's issued 3 separate press releases on the Pope Pius XII and the Vatican Archives issue, so I won't try to restate
But can you summarize what
those
they
press
said?
releases. In essence, they say that we should withhold judgment until all the documents are released through the wartime period and we're able to assess all of them. Now, I agree fully with Mr. Krupp that we should be talking about documents and evidence, and that's where the discussion needs to go.
Thank you very much.
But
Come on.
Our interest in this, by the way, is that this issue impacts over 1 billion people. That's why we're involved with it, negatively. 1 billion people don't like each other because of this. And this is not just Jews and Catholics, but it is causing conflict and problems. And that's why we said, and I'm not dealing with scholars. I'm dealing with the everyday person. Now, you're a scholar. Would you believe that he was an anti-Semite or that he was a Nazi collaborator?
I'm a historian. I go only by evidence.
According to the evidence you've seen.
There is no evidence that we have seen, and I believe we need written evidence to call someone an anti-Semite to make him an anti-Semite. Now, whether he was or was not, I don't know. We don't have written documentation on it. He was no pro-Nazi. He was no pro-Hitler person. However, to say that he rescued the number of Jews that you claim and some claim he does.
I have not claimed anything. I've only reported what Pincus
Right.
Lapida has claimed.
Well, there are many,
and
many
Sir
other
Martin Gilbert
documents.
has claimed.
We could go to specific sets you have actually introduced here to discuss.
Right.
There are other points of view and other documents and counter documents to what you've
I'm
presented.
interested in the negative documents. That's what I'm interested in getting. Things that are not pleasant, that are not, and nobody has ever sent anything to us. And I said, and I'll verify them. For example, the 1938 speech, the Eucharistic Congress in Hungary, where everybody says this is blatantly anti-Semitic, where he's talking about those whose lips curse Christ. You know the speech I'm talking about. I was getting into an argument with Gabriel Walensky on this. And I said, now understand that this speech was delivered in Hungary, in Budapest in 1938, by a native Italian, and was delivered in French. And then the speech was then translated into Hungarian, and then into Hebrew, and then the accusations that he was condemning the Jews, and then into English. So I said to Walensky, I said, well, have you ever seen the original speech? He said, well, no. Are you telling me that my translation is wrong? I said, well, I'm telling you that it's possibly wrong, and we got the original speech. Ron Rishlak just wrote a brilliant article that they took one section from here and another from there. In fact, Jews are not even mentioned once. He was condemning the godless regimes of National Socialism and communism in that speech. And yet, nobody...
But that's separate from condemning anti-Semitism and what was happening to Jews specifically.
I'm sorry.
That's a separate issue.
Well, we have, as I said, there were a number of different issues here. I have one,
By the way,
Wait a second.
why we want questions here, please?
Sorry.
Are you
Yeah,
all
that's okay.
reluctant? And by the way, I really appreciate your comments. We really do.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Alan? Alan T. Brownfeld?
This is from the Jewish Virtual Library. I think everybody can read that. In 1942.
Shall we just pass
I mean,
that?
they did this. And I'm now got and her.
I'm sorry,
her,
Gary, if you have something you want to use up here, just, and I'm a little bit
Yeah, that,
disorganized.
this, by the way, is from the American Jewish Committee, right? In a 1957 meeting with the Pope prior to that, where they're stating that he did so much to save the Jewish people at the time.
Okay, Alan?
What I don't quite understand is how, at the end of World War II, people like Albert Einstein and Golda Meir
By the way.
hailed Pope Pius XII and his role in
Right.
rescuing Jews and opposing Hitler. And today, the organized Jewish community has launched a major campaign against the canonization of the Pope. What new has been discovered since that period, and what do you think the motivation is of those in the organized Jewish community who have launched this campaign against Pope Pius?
Well, again, the campaign is not new. It's been going on for years. I mean, and it's not a Jewish campaign. The fact is, these people, like everybody else, this was part of a KGB. It's actually part of a KGB plot to create this play. This play actually turned the course of history.
I'd like to introduce you to Mark Rupp. He's writing a book about this, and he's found that these are completely falsified documents.
They're all falsified. And they were falsified by the KGB. We have that from General Pacepa. And he tells you precisely how they did it. They would go to the Vatican archives. They would get copies of like these documents we're posting with the Vatican stationery, and they had the names of the people. You'll be able to get this once it's finally corrected. It's the framing of Pius XII. And what they did was they strategically translated this into 20 languages, placed it around the world in strategic spots, except for one thing, that, and by the way, this is Ralph Holcroft with his best friend, to this day, David Irving. That's his closest friend who wrote this play. But you'll see that different rabbis who were alive then, who defended him and said, how could you say this about this man? You have so many different situations over here. This was the article. If you go online, and it's called Moscow's Assault on the Vatican. Just go online and you pull out General Pacepa's story. He'll tell you exactly, because he's the one who did it. This isn't a theory. He did it. He said, I did it. And he admits it today, and, he's sorry. But here, you can see, that there were people defending. There were Israelis over here. Israelis defend the name of Pius XII, 1963. But all of a sudden, the media, unfortunately, didn't pick this up. You heard the negative stuff. And this thing grew, and so on. And, by the way, this is the picture of Hitler's Pope. That's the picture of his, and to this day is there. And by the way, Yad Vashem was selling that. It's been discredited. Now, we were at Yad Vashem. I always go to, I'm in Israel 6 times a year. I was in Yad Vashem in November. I brought my boys were with us. And actually, my father's picture in one of the other Holocaust museums, but this was no longer being sold there. And they had Dan Kurzman's book. They had some of the newer pieces of information that's becoming available.
I just want to say one thing in support of, after I had about the 5th draft of Eugenio, I decided to read The Deputy. My first reaction was, this was the worst play I had ever read. Has anybody read it? Has anybody ever? I mean, I'm speaking of the playwright. Now, you have to admit it's dreadful, long passages. And I said, only the KGB could. I speak to Gary Krupp, and what does he tell me? It's written by the KGB. I really want to maintain neutrality on this whole thing, because I'm not an expert.
Well, it actually was rewritten. It was rewritten by the name of Erwin Biscotter, who was a communist who defected to Russia.
Well, Mark Ruff, who's one of the finest scholars on the Catholic Church in Germany, would disagree with your argument completely. Mark Ruff at University of St. Louis.
Which part?
He is writing a book on the whole Hutu
And which would he disagree on?
This whole argument about the KGB infiltration.
Oh, it's not right.
It's not an argument.
It's not correct.
This is the guy that did. He can write any book he wants, but this is the guy who physically picked the people who forged the documents, actually picked the theaters that were going to go in, and you'll be able to read it. Just read that one story. And by the way, this is Susan.
Yes, but he's not telling the truth.
Who isn't?
The Romanian agent.
How do you know that?
We've investigated that.
So the names are false and everything, and he lied about the whole thing? And,
that's correct.
And you can prove that. I'm interested in the proof because I'm actually he's under CIA protection in this country. You know that he brought down Ceausescu, that he wrote Red Horizons, and that he has everything. He's under CIA protection right now. And you may have proven it. I'm interested in how you did it, but the Vatican has gone over it also, and they verified. The only thing they said are wrong is some of the dates that are in here are wrong.
Are you talking with Father Gumpel? Who are you
No. In the he's not the only one. And by the way, he's one of the most brilliant men you'll ever meet.
What is his name, please?
What?
What is his name? The
Who?
Romanian KGB.
Pacepa.
Pacepa?
Yeah.
How do you
Mihai
spell it?
Pacepa. P-A-C-E-P-A.
Sir.
My name is Dino Caterini, which probably tells you all you have to know. I'm not Jewish. I'm Italian-American.
You could be an Italian Jew.
I'm a Catholic.
And by the way, the Jews were in Rome 1,000 years before the Christianity.
That's correct. But for me, I find this very interesting because basically my character is such that I don't like demonizing. And I always felt that Pope Pius XII was somewhat demonized. And I don't think we get anywhere demonizing. Now, I don't have any documents that will prove anything. But I can tell you that I've been to Italy many times. I was in the Foreign Service. I was assigned there. I studied there. All my relatives are there. The only relatives I have here are my mother and father and sisters and brothers. I have never heard, one anti-Semitic remark.
Right.
Period.
You won't.
Never.
And in Italy.
The Italians, by nature, are not anti-Semitic.
Right.
Now, there's a very interesting...
80% of the Jews who survived in Italy during the Holocaust, but
Exactly.
20%
They
survived
have the
that process.
highest survival rate of any of the...
And by the way, we have many of the documents where Pacelli was sending money to Campania, for example, and in compiling where he says that 4 different times where he said this is for the support of the Jews in your diocese. And by the way, the professor from France,
But that was Jewish money.
That's-
That was not Vatican money.
except that Pius XII used every penny of his personal money, died a pauper, and he gave that money to Jews who were escaping, and especially going to Brazil. They had a very high price they
Those
had
were
to pay.
Catholics.
They were not Catholics.
They were
They
Catholics.
were Jews because 1 week after they got there, many of them had their visas revoked.
Sorry.
They didn't.
There is an interesting book I'll have to refer you to.
And you have to say, well, when did they become Catholics, and how long were they Catholics?
For many, many years.
Do you have the names of these people?
There is a book on this I will refer you to.
Book on this, but the thing is, we need the documents. I want to see the baptismal papers when they were baptized. As I said, it takes a minimum of 1 to 3 months plus baptizing, not a baptismal certificate, but an actual rite of baptism. That's according to canon law. They were not all converted Jews.
If you think about the
And by the
Nuremberg laws.
way, let me tell you how sure I am of that. You know why? In the church, once you're baptized, you're no longer a non-Aryan.
Oh, I understand. I'm
You
Catholic
are a
myself.
Catholic.
But let's-
You're a Catholic.
Yes, exactly right, and this is why they were considered Catholics. The Nuremberg
They
laws
weren't.
go back to grandparents. There were a lot
I
of
understand
German
that.
families who did convert to Catholicism in a very intentional way.
But when the Vatican was writing their documents, they referred to them as non-Aryans.
That's because
Okay.
that is the language of the
No,
time.
if they were
That is
if
Nuremberg law
they were
language.
baptized, they were Catholics.
Exactly.
But these were not baptized Catholics. They had a baptismal certificate. And we had the same thing. We had multiple situations like that. The best example is after Kristallnacht. In that example, he says these are non-Aryans, 200,000.
Let's take Kristallnacht. There were 2 reports on Kristallnacht,
Okay.
November 15th and November 19th, that are in the ADSS series and in the newly
Okay.
released documents. That Cesare Orsenigo wrote to Pacelli long detailed reports listing the atrocities of Kristallnacht very specifically.
Right.
Pacelli refused to issue a specific condemnation, even when Lord Rothschild approached him for the first week of December statement from the Lord
Okay, and
Manor.
you have, all right. So my
I've got the you have the documents. They've been available. They're in the ADSS series. They're
Right.
in the newly released
Right, but
documents.
we have this action where he's trying to get these people out of Europe. We have his request with 65 bishops saying, we got to get these people out of here.
Yes, Catholics out.
No.
Non-Aryan Catholics are Catholics.
No, they aren't.
They are Catholics.
It's never been used in the history of the Catholic Church. Excuse me, this phrase has never been used before or since.
Because the Nuremberg laws are a new
I understand that, but he
thing
wasn't
in the world.
it was a very, very simple thing. He would not call them Catholics if they were not baptized. If they'd been baptized, they'd be Catholics. He'd refer to them. Why would he not? Why would he not?
These are baptized people we're talking
Then they
about.
would be Catholics, not non-Aryans. They would be
The
Catholics.
Nazis
Okay,
considered
I'd like to-
Not the
non-Aryan
Nazis.
Catholics.
This was not for the Nazis.
I'll get right back
These
to
were not
this.
letters for the Nazis. These were letters to all the nuncios and bishops.
Yes, I've read them.
Right, and they were written in High Latin.
Okay, we'll get right back to
Just a second. In High Latin, it says that you should not just take care of the people, you should take care of their religious precepts, their religious books, and their religious institutions. In that letter, 4 weeks after Kristallnacht. It says it there, in Latin. Why would you say that about converted?
The whole issue with the Brazilian visas came from Cardinal Faulhaber in
I
Munich.
understand that, yes. And what happened was the Vatican only got
We're talking
1,000.
about
Why
Catholics.
don't you, don't shout to that.
No. And that would only be if they only got 1,000. The
Hey,
Vatican got
wait a
1,000.
minute. Wait,
I'd like to
we'll come
hear her
back to
answer.
this.
Let other people
Sir,
ask some
go
questions.
ahead.
I'd like to hear her
No,
answer.
let's hear you, and then we'll come back to her. And by the way, I was going to say something else. Feel free to get drinks here. Please get some drinks.
By the way, I hope you're looking at some of these, because this was a Palestine Post article written about Pacelli when he
Sorry,
had a
Dan.
Jewish boy in there in 1941, where he tells him, be proud to be a Jew. This is in the Palestine Post of an article in 1944 of a 1941 meeting.
We'll come back.
Chris Gunty.
Before we move on to the next question, what
Yeah.
happens when they revoke the visas?
I have no
They're
idea.
already in Brazil.
Yeah, they're already there, but they can't travel beyond. I'm not sure what they did, but they were these people were practicing non-Orthodox religious
couldn't
ceremony.
leave
They were
Brazil
deceived.
like
And plus the fact, we have the letters where the Vatican was protesting the amount that they were paid. And Pacelli used his own money. He used his own money with the rescue with Archbishop Sentione. We'd get visas, we'd get Vatican passports and cash for Jews getting into Switzerland.
These are Catholics.
Okay, go ahead.
They're not Catholics because
Okay.
it doesn't even say that. We're talking about something else. You can say that.
Okay, right
The
here.
fact
Okay.
is, according to Monsignor Sentione, who did it, he said these were Jews. He names them. Go look at the interviews we have. Listen to this man. He's 99 years old, sharp as a tack. Very, very sharp. He says, no, these are Jews, and here are some of the names of them who we rescued, and I got money from the Vatican, from the Pope himself. He used all his own cash and gave it to them.
Okay,
So
sir.
it's easy to say that they're all converted Jews.
Okay, next question.
Huh?
Sir.
I'm Chris Gunty with the Catholic Review newspaper in Baltimore. You talked a little bit about the Gestapo report with Pacelli and Leiber
Right.
and co-conspirators in the plot against Hitler. You said those records didn't come from the Vatican; they came from the British
No,
archives.
no, that came from Germany.
Okay, came from Germany. I thought my note says that
No,
they
the
were in
British
British
archives was
But the question is, at some point, once the rest of these documents are opened up, do you expect to find something in the Vatican archives that will corroborate
according
this?
to Father Gumpel, he said that there's not one shred of evidence. Because Father Gumpel has been, this canonization process, going on for 40 years. And he's the judge. He's not the postulator. He's the judge. He's the one that says, well, is it worth it or not worth it? You know, and he tries to verify things. He verified the ending of the arrest of the Roman Jews, because he spoke to General Dietrich Baylitz in 2000 before he died, and verified a phone conversation where General Stahl had threatened Himmler, because he listened in on the conversation as the liaison with Kesselring's office. So he verified this. So a lot of this stuff is based on information that we have from people, witnesses. So you have to, if you're going to judge this thing, you have to judge it according to, you have to take both sides. You have to be simple. This is not a scientific study. This is not for historians. This is for the everyday person. The guy was not anti-Semitic. He was not a Nazi collaborator. This is the bottom line. And the historians will tell you that's true.
But my question is, what are you expecting then to find in the rest of those documents that would either support the rest of that theory that no, I mean, he didn't change from what you've already seen in these documents that have already been available,
The only thing,
or that will support some of these other things that you're saying are
Okay.
available through other sources?
the only thing I can guess, and I can only guess because I'm not allowed. If you come, I will take you to Rome. If you want, you let the Holocaust Museum can pay for it.
I'm coming too.
But if you come to Rome, Professor Limor is coming. I'm bringing her to Rome, and you're going to come up and see documents that are from the hidden section, closed section. Read them yourself. Can't take pictures, but you're going to see just some of the documents that they have. The question is that all during the cataloging process, again, they've got 26 people doing this. Every time a significant document is discovered, the Pope is aware. He's alerted to this. He took 2 years. The actual decree was signed 2.5 years ago to grant the, to start the canonization process for him. He said, no, I want to study this myself, and he did. Don't forget, he has full access to the closed section. He knows everything that's going through there, and he has physically read them. So there was one guy who actually said that he's listening to me. Pope doesn't listen to me. I have nothing to do with this. You know, I'm not in favor of this. We don't even believe in the process. The point is that if this Pope signed this decree, you can be very well assured that they are absolutely certain they're not going to find one negative thing in those records.
Well, I'm
Okay.
not so sure we can assume that. We've seen other mistakes the church has made recently.
Well, we're not even dealing with the mistakes of the church. I'm dealing with one man. I'm dealing with the actions of one man. I'm dealing with Pacelli, and this guy is studying what he's saying. So he's seeing documents as they're coming up. Do you think, is there a smoking gun out there?
I don't know.
Do
We
you
need to
think,
open the
why
archives and look.
is it that every Jewish leader in the world, and I love this answer because Susan Zuccotti once answered this, every Jewish leader in the world at that time praised him. Every one of them. All of the Italian
They were
Jews.
ignorant of the facts.
What fact? What fact were they ignorant? They lived through the war. They saw what he did.
You also have to look at the political context of the time and the hope that the Vatican would support the foundation of the State of Israel.
Okay, that is nonsense. And I'll tell you why. Here's why. You're telling me that some secret letter went around to the heads of the Italian Jewish community, the Slovakian Jewish community, the Romanian Jewish community, the Jewish communities of the United States, every chief rabbis of Rome, Norway, every one of them, Albert Einstein, everyone said, let's be nice to him because we want him to help the United States.
That is extraordinarily simplistic.
You're right, but that's exactly what you're saying, that everybody did this because they wanted to be nice to Israel. No, they felt, and by the way, in Judaism...
No, I'm saying you need to look at each thing on a case-by-case
Exactly.
basis. You have made so many blanket statements tonight that are just flat out not factually correct.
Well, which one?
Okay, let's take a couple of them then. Let's start with your slide on
wait a minute, Ellen,
the Catholic Church condemning Nazis to removing them from the church. You didn't mention that in March
Say-
1933, that was revoked.
Yeah,
The 1930 decree by
You're
the
talking-
German bishops that anyone in the
that
Nazi
was
party
because of
would
the
be
Concordat.
excommunicated.
That was.
Right.
They never
Well,
dropped the condemnation of that.
that
They-
absolutely was dropped.
No,
in March
the-
1933.
they had to lift, in order for the Concordat, they had to lift that because that now became the law of the land. And according to
Correct,
Catholic...
but I think in your presentation you need to not just leave it as in 1930 all Nazis are excommunicated and fail to mention that in 1933 that was no longer the case.
Well, the fact is, well, you have a very good point, except I don't have that detail of that particular situation. I've heard of that through Father Gumpel, but I'm not sure of the dates or anything else. I know they did have to relief to eliminate that. This I do understand. But the
Okay,
fact
Ellen,
is,
Ellen.
to say that he never excommunicated anyone is wrong. They did.
Okay, Ellen?
And it showed at the very early onset and the early time of
Responsible
things.
historians don't say that.
You're right. You are right, they don't. But everybody else does.
Okay, Alan.
I'm not dealing with historians.
Alan, we're going to
I'm
get back
dealing
to
with-
this, because,
Yeah, go
by
ahead.
the way, you people, I love this, but
What I don't understand, and I understand that as the Nazis came to power, there is a great deal of legitimate criticism to be made of both the Protestant churches and the Catholic Church in Germany. That at the very beginning, when anti-Semitic decrees were first enunciated, if they had spoken out, I think they could have had a tremendous effect. And as I was
We talked
discussing
about
with
that
you
earlier.
earlier,
Again, that's
in
speculation,
the
yeah.
Rosenstrasse
No,
case,
very good point.
where non-Jewish wives of Jewish men who were incarcerated protested, they were let out.
Mhm.
The Nazis could have been influenced, and neither the Protestants nor the Catholics, in the view of many, did what they should have done. Nevertheless, when we're talking about Pius XII as an individual, I don't understand, again, how at the end of the war he was hailed for all of his good works, and today he's so widely condemned. What could there be in the Vatican that would alter the good things he did do that you mentioned? It's a lot different than saying the church is blameless. I mean, after all, the anti-Semitism of the church through history
Well,
laid a
yes, but,
fertile
yeah,
ground
that-
for anti-Semitism. I mean, we understand all
Right,
that.
right.
But I don't understand what more could we find about Pius XII in the Vatican
I have no
documents
idea.
that would change things.
I have no idea, and I find it very confusing. I don't understand why every Jewish leader in the world said that. I do not believe, because in Judaism, you know the worst character flaw you can have in Judaism? It's called ingratitude. It's true. They said Moses was not allowed to condemn the Nile because he got life from it. Ingratitude. And you're telling me that Albert Einstein, all of the chief rabbis, all were just trying to be nice to him? And they were saying this, they put plaques up in his face. It doesn't make sense. That's simplistic. That's silly. It's silly.
It's politics.
It's not politics. No, it isn't. Because we have 10 Jews, you've got 12 opinions. We don't get along like that. It just doesn't exist. And I don't see Albert Einstein doing that. I don't see,
Nobody goes on official visits to the Vatican or state visits and then critiques publicly the head of state. That's not, they wouldn't take the visit in the first
These
place
are
if
statements
was
that
gonna
came from
happen.
all over the world, from every different sector, completely unrelated. And they would send it for what he did in Romania and what he did here and what he did. But you're holding him responsible for things that he may not have had the ability to do anything about. You can speculate all you want. I'm just saying that this is what he did. And I just go through that. These are articles that I pulled out. Just look at the volume of it. Every one of them were things that he had said or statements that were made. And from the Palestine Post, from the New York Times, these are all And I can't find one negative article. Why is he such a demon?
But you can't take a New York Times report. Take, for instance, the New York Times report on the December 1938 statement
that Lord Rothschild made is titled Pope something like critiques Nazis and defends Jews. When you look at the statement Pacelli made, and in his internal notes, he specifically said, we can't specifically protect Jews here. We have to make a general statement about being helpful to broader humanity. And that's the statement that was issued in December 1938. And New York Times gave it a caption that it really didn't earn. So we have to look at the original documents, not a New York Times rendition.
I agree with you, but the fact is that people say, I am not saying that he's perfect. I am not saying anything. I don't think about canonization. I don't deal with that. I'm saying that the general idea with what I grew up with is wrong. And I am, just like everybody else here, it's wrong. And the historians have handled this terribly, because you haven't straightened that out. Because when you hear these things, and you see statements that are made, and you don't correct it, you don't say, no, he was not an anti-Semite. He wasn't anti-Semitic.
Many books say that.
No, they don't. Nobody says it, because if you ask the average person, go to the street, anybody who walks into your museum, what do you think of Pius? Go to Yad Vashem, look at the placard and what it says.
I know what the placard says.
Listen, I just want to say...
By the way, and Sir Martin Gilbert, who, by the way, is not a slouch, who is the one who has been pushing us to do this, is the one that they actually said, Sir Martin Gilbert wrote it, he was furious. He's going to be there in May. And Sir Martin Gilbert said he went over every item on this thing. He says, this is wrong, they couldn't have done this, they would have violated the neutrality for this, on and on for all of the points of this placard. But the fact is, and you have a guy like Minervi, Sergio Minervi, who himself was saved by the Vatican with his mother and father, because we have the names of them. They saved them. And yet he's the worst against them. But you have Michael Telekotso, who was the Holocaust archivist in northern Haifa, who gave me his testimony in Hebrew of how the Pope saved him. And he knows it, and he knows this is true. He has a stack of all the witnesses that he's taken the stuff from. I have Robert Adler, who we just interviewed. Look at the interviews. This guy's father was physically brought into the Vatican, met with the Pope on several occasions, and was then sent to the Dominican Republic through the same people we found, Monsignor Ferrafino. So we have these things that, yes, they acted secretly, they did things.
All these testimonies need to be backed up with documentation.
Well, how are you going to do that if it was, in other words, if it wasn't written, it didn't happen, right? He has, Robert Adler's interview, you will see the documentation, because they videotaped his passport, you see the entry and exit visits. He came to the United States for 1 day, only as an entry, he was only allowed to stay here, and he was settled in the Dominican Republic. This is all done through the Vatican. He tells you it was done through the Vatican.
Well, I'm confident that if you're going to publish this...
I'm not publishing it. It's just online. It's on my website. The interview's there. Okay. And by the way, the woman who did the interview is the head of the Jewish Commission for North America. She sits on the board, and he is on the Holocaust Commission in Alabama, appointed by the governor of Alabama. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say this. He saved my father's life. I have the air in my lungs today because of that man's actions.
Okay.
That's called gratitude.
Okay. By the way, I just want to say this. My casual empiricism working on this through the years, of the scholars who have worked on this, I would say that it's divided half and half among Jews and Catholics. And this is enheartening. Half the Catholics are anti-Pius and half are pro, and the same, I would say, with the Jews. Is this what you found too?
No, actually what I found, and by the way, before I started this, I found that a lot of Jews are open to listen about that,
right.
At least to see that he's not the way they
Let me guess, now you're going to say it's all a Catholic problem,
what?
and that the Catholics are leading the campaign against Pius VI.
No, some of them are, but not really.
And I would answer, I'd like to answer
that.
What I have noticed, and this is from speaking hundreds of interviews, and remember, I'm not an expert, I'm just giving you my, and this shouldn't be quoted here. I find the people who are the most anti-Pius are people about to become ex-Catholics or ex-Catholics.
Suppose some of us still practice and still would like to look at the documents.
Yes, you should look at them.
Yeah, that's different.
And I'm trying to help you.
If you
would, and I expressed this. I told Yad Vashem. I was in touch with them. With
Susan, do you want to answer?
And I said to them, I will bring you to Rome.
This man.
Why? Because I have some access that others don't have. But it's not official. They wanted an official invitation. I said, you're not going to get that. You're going to have to come with me, and you're going to have to sit and meet with people, and you have to ask questions, and I will bring you there. I told them this.
Stand up.
Yeah.
And Dr. Lamore's coming in, she's coming in April, I think.
Okay, stand up.
Hey, hi. Yeah, I'm still Ben Barber. If I could just make a little comment, I think that you're hate to say this, but too much of an advocate for one point of view, and that if you were a little more balanced, it would be
I'm only
helpful.
telling you how I feel emotionally.
Okay,
From
okay.
being, from coming from one place
Okay.
and then learning that everything I knew was completely wrong.
Okay, let me, and I
That's
just want
the, I'm disappointed.
say,
No, but
another
he's trying
point.
to tell you, why don't you listen to the man? He's trying to give you
Yeah,
good advice.
there it is, yeah.
He really is. He's trying to give you good advice, Scotty. Just
Take a Valium before going on stage.
I can't, listen, I agree with you. My wife tells me all the time, it's the same thing. I get very emotional
It's the
about this.
passion. It's
Because you know
true.
what?
It's
My father
passion.
liberated two
Okay.
camps,
All right.
Odruf and Buchenwald, and he was wounded in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah,
And
but-
he, you know, and he fought in the war, and I lived with this, with pictures he took of the concentration camps as a young boy. I grew up with this.
I'm trying to tell you that, the way to communicate with people is to be more even-handed, and that.
I am trying to get that. That's what I said. I don't have access to these documents.
I
And you
just
have
wanna tell
documents
you
that
one more-
I would love to have them, and I will
You
put
need
them
to
on.
be a listener.
Yeah.
I,
I'm not here to listen. I'm here to speak.
the,
I'm going to stand here and listen all night.
Not on the question and answer period. No one can get a question out to you.
I just want to say one thing, that you mentioned about this defector who prepared this play, in support of the play, and I studied journalism at Boston University, and one of my teachers was a guy named Larry Martin, but his real name was Vladislav Bitman. He was a KGB colonel in the Czech KGB. In '68, he defected. In '68, he, like many Czechs, became imbued with this idea of the Czech opening. And then he was at an embassy outside, and he defected. And he wrote a book about what his job was. His job was basically to forge documents that would implicate the Catholic Church with Nazism. He got from Russia documents that had never been seen before. He added in the names of prominent West German Catholics and politicians and priests, had them added to these documents.
Is this fellow still alive?
Yes.
Can you introduce him?
Yes.
I think you should talk to him.
He wrapped them in Nazi-era bags and sank them in a lake and arranged for some Swedish diving team to discover them.
That is interesting.
But
That is why I interrupted you, because I knew that answering the questions is better. I mean, you have a wealth of information here. With the young lady in the back there, let me take a hike back to you.
she's got her notes, yeah. Come on, stand by.
Hi. Can you give her name?
I'm Michelle Gill, of no particular whatever. But I have an interest in history and truth. And first I'd just like to say this has been absolutely fascinating from a psychological point of view. I felt like I was watching a Fox News when they're like, hey, you said this, and they're all talking like I can't hear any of you, so... First I'd like to ask, why do we care what Pius XII did or didn't do? I always find it, and in the interest of being totally honest, I am Catholic myself, and my father was, excuse me, a prisoner in not in one of the concentration camps, but in one of the labor camps in Germany. He was only 16 when Hitler invaded Poland. So I have a very unique perspective. It is also an emotional subject for our family as well. Why do we care? What he did or didn't do? Most people only care when it's something that's important to them, but I find it very interesting that when it comes to perhaps contraception or abortion, people are like, well, I don't care what the church says. They're not going to tell me what to do, blah, blah, blah. And you shouldn't tell your priest what to do either. And but then when it comes to something like this, it's like, where's the church? I'm just curious, why aren't we looking at FDR? Why aren't we looking at, I mean, my God, he called Stalin Uncle Joe. Any of the other countries, the heads of state, where were they?
Right. It was every rabbi on earth at the time.
I really like that question. Is there a chance we could have both of you give an answer?
Yeah, I would love to give an answer to
And
that
then,
question.
may I ask Colin her first, sir?
I'll sit down.
And then...
I would say Gary must be an extrovert.
And then,
I don't
could
like
you all
it.
make your answers like 2 minutes
Yeah.
at the most?
Now here I am not speaking for the museum, I'm speaking as a Catholic, It's a matter of making sure...
Are you a Catholic too?
Of course.
What did I tell you? What did I tell you? Are you supposed to delete?
Isn't everyone?
Okay.
Speaking as a Catholic, not as someone who works for the museum, it's important for the church to reckon with its history honestly. Now, I think if it weren't for this move to canonization, this wouldn't be such a hot issue. Historians know, Mr. Krupp was right, Pacelli was certainly no pro-Nazi. We have no concrete evidence that he was an anti-Semite. We also don't have concrete evidence that he intervened specifically for Jews en masse and did what he could above and beyond to prevent the Holocaust.
But can you please answer the question again? Why should we care?
Why should we care? We should care because it's another one of those issues that the church has not completely been forthcoming on.
But it happened 70 years ago. I mean, it was
Yes.
it's ugly, ugly, ugly.
But the church is not a political institution. It's a twofold institution. It's also supposed to... It is a... I'm sorry, let me correct. It's a political institution in how it operates, but it is supposed to be a higher institution than that. It holds itself to the standard of love thy brother. And if it holds itself to that standard, it can be judged by that standard.
Okay, good answer. Paul? And then, Jerry, I'll give you the mic.
Well, my point is when you said that they're not doing it, is that they actually are trying to. They are trying to. The fact is that when they did the documents of the Acts and Documents of the Holy See, they tried, based on the fact that all of a sudden they saw that Pacelli was being attacked in 1964, and the whole everything was changing, and there were riots. I mean, there were people that were rioting that were so furious about this. But they are trying. They're trying to do something. But why should it mean anything? Because you got a lot of people that don't like each other for this reason. That's why I'm involved.
And it's a Jewish obligation.
It is a Jewish obligation, because if, in fact, you're saying no concrete evidence, I don't believe that's true. I believe we have concrete evidence. Testimony, you know, you're archival, and Sir Martin tells me this all the time. I'm an archival historian, that there's always a scrap of evidence someplace which will bring it up. Except it can take you 200 years before you'll find it. Meanwhile, we have other situations that are far worse, that this is an obstacle, which is why we're trying to deal with it, at least on the general principle. You know what? Even if he's not saintly, he's a nice guy, and he did try to do something, and he did try to save Jews. We have people who, they're not lying, they're not making it. Go and watch the video. Please, watch Monsignor Ferrafino's video, watch Monsignor Centione's video, watch Robert Adler's video. They're on my website. You can see them. You have to register, by the way, because a lot of these documents are copyrighted to the Vatican, so they're not my property, and I'm just, you know, you just acknowledge that you're not using it for commercial purposes, and you can get the free access to it. But go on there and look at it. And the fact is that, yes, the letter that comes back saying from Scotland that we are trying to do this, and a letter that goes out saying you have to take care of these people. The letter came back saying the persecuted Jews. Didn't come back saying the non-Aryan Catholics. The letter
I am looking at the documents, sir, and I see
Did you see that letter in your work?
Not that particular one.
Okay, did you see, and you saw the letter from January 9th, from asking in High Latin for that you should take care of these their religious precepts, their religious. You saw that letter.
I have seen that letter and many on the
Well, what does that mean to you?
non-Aryan Catholic issue.
What does that mean? Does that mean that these are Catholics? Or does that mean that these are people who we're calling Catholics because if the Nazis, and this is what happens in real life, in a Nazi regime, if they capture this document, this can impact our neutrality. And so we got to call them we got to do something to cover our butts. So let's call them non-Aryan Catholics.
Okay, I just want to...
Yeah, go ahead.
One last thing, Gary, you're doing okay, but I mean, the advice of that man there, you protest a little too much, you know. I don't know why, and I just want to know, why is it, I'm Catholic right away, like talking to Chris, but why is it that I was sort of brought up with the idea that Pius XII is no good?
Why is it?
Yeah.
Why were you brought up that way?
Yeah, I was.
You brought up in Ireland, right?
Yeah, I was brought up with the
Because
idea.
everybody, we all were. I was too.
Why? No, why? I don't
Why?
know.
Well, after the play, the deputy came out.
Yeah, you're basing it all on the deputy, aren't you?
Most of it. Yeah, because that's all of a sudden the world sentiment changed. Well, you tell me when it changed.
I don't know.
You don't know. Well, that's the point. But we know, we can see by, at least by the newspaper reports, that yes, it flipped. Everybody did a 180. And it happened very fast. And then after that, Cornwell came out with his book. Susan Zuccotti, and all of the other people who went after him, and a lot of that stuff has been
one of the
destroyed.
finest historians of the Holocaust.
Cornwell?
No, Susan Zuccotti.
Oh, Susan Zuccotti is, yes, she
She's a
is.
very fine
Except, did you see
historian.
the last sentence in her book?
I did read her book. I haven't read it
The
in a long
last sentence
time.
is very telling. It says, yes, it's true that all the monasteries and monks and priests and everything throughout Italy took the Jews and helped it, but there's no evidence that the Pope had anything to do with it.
There is no evidence.
No, you're wrong.
You're
Okay.
thinking of that
You're
diary
wrong.
entry.
Because one of my
And that diary
documents,
entry-
one of my documents is the handwritten diary from a nun from
I know that handwriting.
But that's not evidence?
That's not enough evidence.
Because, in other words, you'll only accept the letter. And then you saw Bishop Nicolini from Assisi was talking to a priest, and he says, I have here a letter telling me that we have to take the Jews in and protect them. And the letters were to be destroyed because you didn't want them falling into enemy hands. So they had to be destroyed. And Susan Zuccotti said because he didn't see the letter, the signature of the Pope, it didn't exist. But you know what?
She doesn't say it didn't exist. She says we cannot say for sure it existed.
Of course I know that, but it gives everybody the impression that. But here's my point. Part of being a historian, this is why I have a problem, because you'll see historians change. As Sir Martin Gilbert said, part of that is because there's certain life experience that you need to have when you're analyzing something. You need to know what it's like to have a gun pointed to your head. You need to know what it's like that if you're caught with an unencrypted phone number in your pocket, you're executed. You need to know that the Vatican was surrounded by hostile forces, and had this man been the moral coward that everybody accused him of, he could have gone to Portugal and set up a government in exile, but he chose to stay in his diocese.
Nobody is calling him a moral coward. He
Well,
is protecting
except
his
for
own
one thing.
church.
Yes, the everyday person is.
Okay.
You aren't because you're a historian. You know this is not true. But you know what else he did? He refused to put the heat on. He also wouldn't eat, and he wouldn't take coffee because the people in his diocese couldn't have it. And then during the bombing of Italy, he went out into the street. I have one letter from a woman. They said, the Vatican said, don't even pay attention to this. I said, I'm sending it to Yad Vashem anyway, and I sent it. This is from a woman who had a 1947 audience with the Pope. Her uncle, who was Jewish, was with her whole family, her mother, father. And her uncle goes over to the Pope, and he looks at him, and he said, you were dressed as a Franciscan, and you came into the ghetto, and you brought me into the Vatican. And you, talking to Montini, you were dressed as a regular priest. And Montini says, silence, don't ever repeat that story. Now,
Montini is the one who knew about the rat line. Let's not even
the
start
rat line
talking
is the
about
United
Montini.
States' rat.
Oh, the Vatican
And
is the rat
Montini is
line.
the one that also condemned the idea of helping Nazis. My point is, here's my point. Did that happen? Did it? Was it possible that...
Of course it happened.
No.
There's a book by Gerald Steinapper
No,
that's
no,
been
no, no.
published and coming
Okay,
out.
well, wait a minute.
by
No,
Cambridge.
it didn't happen that
We'll-
Shelley went into
I'm
the
going to-
Jewish ghetto and rescued somebody personally.
I'll tell you what, it's 9 o'clock.
They didn't
All I want to say is, you have to
Ready
go.
to go.
I want to say one thing.
They didn't want to-
They are both fabulous. I want to say one thing. The woman who changed my mind on this whole issue was one of the most wretched women in the world. Her name is Rachele Mussolini. In 1972, she wrote her autobiography. In her autobiography, she condemned the Vatican because she tried to get an audience with them to gain respectability in the 70s. They would say no. And this time, she really listened to Pius XII, saying he was her husband's worst enemy. She then said they were well aware that he was harboring Jews in the Vatican, and that he could have gotten her husband into very serious trouble. Now, this woman, I believe she was telling, there was no reason for her to lie, but she was saying, all my husband did all these favors, they wouldn't even give me, a poor widow, an audience. So, I mean, this isn't great high scholarly stuff, but I just wanted to relate to you something simple. Hey, you people have been fabulous. The audience has been fabulous. I'm so glad you came and called.
You really don't want to have this professor speak to her, because he's the one that did it, and he'll tell you the same thing. Consensus says the same. This is how we did it. So the documents you're looking for may or may not exist. The fact is, you have to use other things. You have to use eyewitnesses. You have to.
Let me ask this, Charlie.
Not